Well, Martin, thank you very much. This
Pleasure.
is a pleasure to have you again, and thank you very much as well. And, I would like to start with Eritrea. As you know, you are the expert of the Horn of Africa, especially in Eritrea. You've been to Eritrea. So, how do you see the Eritrean situation now, especially the geolocation?
Well, obviously, you know, things have moved on enormously because you've had Prime Minister Abiy came. There's been rapprochement. There's been a relationship built now with Ethiopia, which is very positive because it has ended the conflict over the border. But what we really don't see yet is that formalized. So there haven't been the committees established to really draw up how the border is going to be administered, and all the communities along the border still need to find out how they are going to live and how they're going to deal with the issue of being maybe in a different country now. Those are big issues, and they really, before they are settled, one would normally expect this to be shared with the Eritrean and the Ethiopian people on both sides so that there can be some discussion, not just dealt with. I mean, of course, the government has to come up with a plan, but then it should really be discussed in some kind of forum. Now, normally one would assume that would go to Parliament, but of course, as we all know, Eritrea doesn't have a Parliament.
Yeah. I think this is one of the threats for Eritrean people. I think you've seen even the American and the French has been involved in helping the Ethiopian try to set up their navy. We don't know exactly, but the president of Djibouti made it clear a few weeks ago that he said it's not going to be in Djibouti, it might be in Massawa. This is kind of an interview. So how do we move from there as Eritrea?
Well, again, really, this is a huge development. I mean, if this is really going to take place and you're going to have a foreign base in your own country without diminishing your sovereignty, then again, I mean, this is something that can certainly, one would expect to see developed by a government. But it should really be discussed with the Eritrean people in some kind of form. And for something as important as that, one would possibly even expect it to perhaps go to a referendum so that people can say, yes, we accept this, or no, we don't. And, you know, and that's one of the great deficits in Eritrea, is the democratic deficit, that people don't have the right to be engaged, to be informed, and then have a right to say yes or no about major issues. I mean, this is not just a question of, you know, how much fertilizer is being given out for a particular year. This is something that will affect the country for many, many years to come. And people have a right to be consulted and their voices heard.
Yes. I think this is one of the problems in Eritrea, and any Eritrean don't have any visibility or knowledge of what's going on behind the door of this agreement in Saudi as well. But for the last few months, we've seen a lot of revolution activity within the diaspora community. Even the member, I went myself to Oslo last week to mobilize the activity. We've seen a lot of people been in Asmara a few weeks ago, and they say in Eritrea, everybody's talking about removing the regime out of the country. And this is what we hear. And we've seen a lot of posts being posted in Asmara streets, Karen, and these are the top places what people they're saying. So having this, we saw Sudan has removed their regime, and we've seen military coming up, and he's trying to stay for 3 years, but the Sudanese people say no for that. They still stick to their goals. What would be your advice for Eritrean people? Because we have the greatest challenge ahead of us, we have the greatest risk as well. How do we remove those risks?
Well, it's not for me to advise the people of Eritrea. I mean, that's an issue which Eritreans must decide for themselves. But as you say, the examples, not just from Khartoum and not just from Sudan, but from around Africa, is that, you know, many regimes have tried to hang on to power indefinitely. And whether it was in Zimbabwe or whether it was in, Sudan, eventually people say enough. And I mean, in a sense, that is what you're beginning to see amongst the Eritrean community now. They are also saying enough. This has gone on too long. And I mean, you only have to look at the number of people who are held in indefinite national conscription, or you see the number of people who are in jail without being tried, without having the right to a fair trial. I mean, this is extraordinary. So, I mean, you know, I can imagine and of course this is up to Eritreans to decide, that they must be getting to a point where they say this cannot continue. And if you say that there are posters going up in Asmara, well, that's a huge development.
It is. I think there was a few meetings as well. Eritrean, they're demanding the regime to declare the border and to know exactly what's the business going on between Ethiopia and Eritrea. But the good thing is most of the Eritrea, 99.9%, even though they were pro-government, the regime, now they're supporting the Eritrean people. I've seen many musicians, they take a big swing for the last few weeks. This is the benefit. But how do we keep this mobilizing? How do we get to our objectives, goal? From your experience with the fighting apartheid is very challenging because it was supported by many Western countries. What would be your advice, seeing all this Arab Spring and Sudan Spring and Eritrean Spring, as you mentioned on your website a few months ago? What would we need to do as the Eritrean people?
Well, I think that there are a number of things that can be done, as I say, drawing on the experience of places like South Africa, where, as you say, I was involved in the anti-apartheid struggle. And I think that there are numbers. The most important thing to do, by far, is that the people should remain united.
Yeah.
And, that is the one thing that is absolutely vitally important, is that people have to hang together and not become factionalized along party lines, along ethnic lines, or, religious lines. So, I mean, the first thing to do is to stand together. Yeah. The second thing, of course, is the flow of information. Because, until quite recently, there was very little ability to get information into Eritrea. And, in the South African case, you had Radio Freedom, which was broadcast by the ANC, and lots of people listened to it quietly in the night, and they got messages and information about what was going on, and that made a big difference. People then thought, yeah, we have friends who are working for us abroad, we're not alone. And I think it is that feeling that you're not alone which makes a huge difference. It gives people the courage to take the decisions. But as I say, it's up to Eritreans to make up their minds.
Yeah. I think this is one of the reasons why we saw in Sudan, the military was watching the young people demonstrate for the last 4 months, but finally they aligned with the people.
That's right.
Because people are the power. And as you mentioned, Eritrean based in Eritrea, they're looking for the diaspora Eritrean. So as you mentioned, we've seen a lot of, you mentioned as well in the previous interview, we need to work as one nation. There is no need for ethnic group or religion or party. At this time, we don't need any party. We need to save the country. Everything priority should be given to the country. Once we have, I think once we get the country back, we can discuss about the party, we can discuss about different issues. Would be this one way to go forward, or?
I think so. I think the one other thing that really is absolutely indispensable is that you have to have a vision of what the future would be like. Yeah. It doesn't have to be written down in, a 100-page document, but everybody has to have in their minds the agreement that, yes, this is what we are going for. I mean, what that vision is entirely an issue for Eritreans. But I mean, if you're looking for a democratic society in which everybody has a right to say, I mean, that is something that is universally not just the rights of Eritreans, it's the rights of all people. They are entrenched in the United Nations Constitution. Their many rights are entrenched in the Constitution of the African Union. So those are already underwritten. They were signed up to by the Eritrean government. They have said that they guarantee you these rights. Why aren't you getting them? Everybody has the right to these things. The right to a free trial, the right to a voice, the right to a free press. These things are embedded in, they are human rights. So, that in a sense has to be the driving vision, I would have thought, of any movement that wants to see a proper change which is going to produce something that is better than the situation you have now.
And let me take you back to the refugee we have in Libya, in Ethiopia, and Sudan. What would be your advice for Eritrean people diaspora to do? Especially we have people being sold in the modern century in Libya, in the same thing in Egypt as well, organs being sold as well. What would be your advice for Eritrean people to do on this?
Well, I think that it should be challenged in every way that you can find to do it. I mean, whether you work with the organizations, the international organizations who have a duty to work on this, whether it's the UNHCR, the International Organization for Migration. You can work with these people. You can put pressure on them. But also, you know, I think for people who are in the diaspora, who are outside of the country, especially if they're living in democracies like the United States, America, Britain, you know, Canada, is that they have representatives who are now elected, and you have the right to go and ask them to intervene on your behalf. So they then put pressure on their governments to intervene in places like Libya to end the slavery. And I mean, I thought it was very positive that we saw a number of congressmen go to Eritrea recently, and some of those have now begun to speak out on Eritrean issues, and that's very positive.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let me tell you one thing, because in any activity there is a time window for time frame. So, because we've seen a lot of activity within Eritrea for the last 30 years, sometimes it goes high as a peak trend and it goes down as well. To avoid this, what we need to do as diaspora, this is my main fear actually.
To that there's no answer.
Yeah.
You know, there's a famous phrase which Shakespeare wrote in an unfortunate context, but it's a good phrase. It was said, "Put your courage to the sticking place, and you shall not fail."
Okay, thank you very much. So the last message is: all politicians, all religion, all ethnic, we need to work together and try to achieve what we need to do.
Well, I think if that is what your aim is a democratic, free Eritrea, I think that's indispensable.
Because tomorrow we're going to Birmingham as well. We have the same event like today. And last time when we had the interview about a year ago, you mentioned a lot of Eritrean are stuck to the church. Most of Eritrean, they go to church, especially the young people who came through Mediterranean and all that. Most of the church belongs to the part of the regime. So now they realize this is the time to be active and support their own people. So what would be your advice for the religion leaders?
Well, you know, it's not for me to advise.
No, I mean kind
leaders.
Of a view.
It's absolutely not my role to advise them. But I mean, you know, all religious leaders are committed to serving their communities.
Yeah, that's the message.
That is their job.
Even the politician.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Really
Pleasure.
appreciate it to have us today.
Nice to see you.
And